Over the years, the roles we now collectively refer to as news leadership or news management jobs have had a kind of invisibility cloak to the outside world. There were no bylines, no profile to speak of, and the job defined the limits of your influence, whether you were an editor, a news director, or a chief of staff. News managers and news leaders were essential to how news was covered, but their identity was only known to those in the newsroom. It's probably fair to say that the invisibility of news leaders is a thing of the past. Like many changes in journalism, we now know more about how the sausage is made and also about the person in charge of the recipe. Our guest today has lived that transformation. His first job in the media was as a researcher for the Nine Network on that lovely old weekend stable Sunday, and also for Geoffrey Robertson's Hypotheticals. Justin joined the ABC in 2006, worked as a producer on 7:30 and Four Corners, and on several political documentaries. His work has been recognised with Logie and Actor Awards and Walkley nominations. In April 2022, Justin became the ABC's Director of News, overseeing the ABC's news operations in Metro and regional Australia and internationally, and all its digital, radio and TV news and current affairs output. So no invisibility there then. We're delighted to have him at the Melbourne Press Club, and after our first course, Justin will join us, and then his remarks will be followed by a Q&A with Michael Rowland. So enjoy the lunch, look forward to Justin's remarks, and we'll see you shortly. Thank you very much.
It's really good to be here today, and it's amazing to see such a fantastic turnout. Thank you. The Melbourne Press Club is an important forum for conversations about journalism and matters of public interest, and I appreciate the invitation. Getting a bit of popping, so that might annoy you all if we keep going in that direction. Given it's a gathering largely of journalists, I'd note that our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander colleagues have a rich tradition of storytelling that goes back thousands of years. As Nick mentioned, we're meeting today on the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and I pay my respects to the traditional owners and to the storytellers and the elders past and present, as well as those emerging. And I extend those respects to any Indigenous colleagues who are in the room today. And I'd also like to thank Ashlyn McGee for her lovely introduction. It's great to see you again. I'd also like to thank Nick Richardson as Press Club CEO for all of his hard work organising the event. Can I get a round of applause for Nick and Ashlyn? I want to talk today about the principles that drive ABC News and the personal values that motivate me when I make decisions as its leader. It's a responsibility I take seriously. And it comes down to two things. One, we're committed to public service in line with the ABC Charter. ABC News is about delivering Australians reliable information they want and need when they want and need it on the platforms and devices that they choose. And two, as technology and the world changes, ABC News remains grounded in the enduring journalistic values of integrity, impartiality and independence. I've led ABC News for more than 2 years now, as Nick said, and he kindly gave me a very generous introduction with the bio, which I'll double up on shortly for the benefit of just getting stuck into a few stories. I landed my first paid job in journalism at the age of 19. I was the most junior staffer on Channel 9's Sunday program, working with then executive producer John Lyons, presenter Jan Event, and a host of producers and reporters at the top of their game, including a really talented video journalist coming through by the name of Sarah Ferguson. My work has always been behind the scenes, and to be honest, I'm not naturally drawn to being in the spotlight. Those who do front our journalism, some of whom are in the room today, have my enormous respect, but let me give a shout out to all the producers and editors and camera operators, stills photographers, graphics artists, and many others whose work in the media isn't always obvious to the public, because the best journalism is way more often than not a team endeavour. I joined the ABC in 2006 as the production assistant on the 7:30 report, and then I worked as Kerry O'Brien and Lee Sales' producer on 7:30, and then moved around the ABC, including at Four Corners, and one-off programs including the doco-series Keating the Interviews and the Killing Season, and then I spent 4 years as the executive producer of 7:30 until I moved to my current role a couple of years ago. In that first stint at the 7:30 report, one of my tasks was logging voicemails to the program. That's when I learned what feedback was all about. Once the caller shared their view of the previous night's interview by holding the receiver to a toilet and flushing it. Sometimes words aren't enough. Working in the media comes with unrelenting pressure, but when I reflect on my career to date, I gravitate to the energising and fulfilling memories, whether it's greeting then Prime Minister John Howard or Opposition Leader Kim Beazley on a crisp Sunday morning at the Sunday programme at Channel 9, or sitting in a hotel room while Kerry O'Brien grilled and interviewed West Wing creator Aaron Sorkin about his recreational drug use, as an agitated publicist tried to stop him and halt the interview, but Kerry kept on going. Or travelling through the Philippines with Peter Grester on assignment for Four Corners, or watching formidable interviewers, whether it's Kerry or Lee, who was in the room. Round of applause for Lee. And now on 7:30, Sarah Ferguson, forensically researching and refining their cross-examinations. And the mindset I've had my entire career, from the start when I was answering those phones, not all phone calls like that, I might add, to where I am now as Director of News, it's been to work overtime to enable others to do their jobs and to be a really good team player and try not to be an attention seeker. But today I'm swallowing my natural inclination to remain backstage because I want to do something that really matters to me and something I consider timely and necessary, and that's to remind people and make the best case I can on why we do at ABC News is so vital. There's never been a more important time for public broadcasting in an age when the currency of truth, facts and integrity is being eroded. Our mission to deliver the public timely, accurate, trustworthy and impartial information is as critical as it's ever been. And at the ABC, it's not just our job, it's a perennial responsibility. Against that backdrop, I'm going to explain to you what I'm doing to build on the legacy of ABC News, staying true to our traditions, while also equipping us for present and future challenges. For most of the past 90 years, the ABC has been in a constant state of evolution. That's from 40 years of radio through to TV, the dramatic changes since in the enhancement of TV with satellites and mobile phones, the technology of film and videotape, the size and weight of cameras, so small these days compared to what they used to be, through to creating ABC iView or commissioning new programs. Change isn't something we do for change's sake. The ABC has survived and thrived because at key moments in its history, it's been bold about changing to guarantee it can serve audiences in the ways the audience expects and needs. Change isn't something we do for change's sake. I'm going to share some snapshots of my personal history because it influences how I see the world and how I approach the principles and values that guide me as an editorial leader. So let's start there. I grew up in Sydney, and it is great to be in Melbourne today and get a warm welcome from Melburnians across the room. I went to a Catholic school with a strong Jesuit tradition. The key lesson from my upbringing was that you take whatever opportunities you've been afforded, small or large, and you use them to help others. I'm the youngest of 4 kids. My dad, now retired, was a doctor, and he was head of paediatric oncology at the Children's Hospital, first at Camperdown and then at Westmead. He spent all day, every day, and many nights and weekends too, treating kids with cancer. My mum, a nurse, worked tirelessly to keep the family ticking. During the week, Mum and Dad would often attend events to raise money for the kids' cancer ward to keep it functioning the way it should. In the 90s, they juggled their fundraising with local political lobbying to create the first children's hospice in New South Wales called Bear Cottage. And to this day, it provides a vital service for our sickest children and families who are in need. Dad's job meant that from a young age, all of us Stevens kids had a clear sense of what a terrible hand life can deal some people. I didn't realise it at the time, but of course, the values I grew up with were the ideal principles for a career in journalism. Namely, but not limited to, having an interest in other people and understanding it's not all about you. In a great trial for my own family and a horrible coincidence, in 2018, my own son Harry was diagnosed with cancer when he was 3. He relapsed in 2021 and completed his second 2-year treatment late last year. He sent me a text he's off today, he sent me a text saying, good luck with the speech, Dada. Harry's now 9 and robust and funny, and as you could bet, really wise beyond his years. And I'm telling you about Harry not because I'm trying to win your sympathy, but because a little later in this speech, I want to return to Harry's story and the experience we've been through as a family to illustrate how fundamentally important it is as to how our experience and what our experience has taught me and my family about journalism. So now you know a little bit about me. Let me give you a very clear explanation of the kind of journalism I believe in and that we stand for at ABC News. We're about giving Australians accurate, timely news that's reported with integrity, free from bias, proprietor influence, corporate pressure, commercial influence, or government interference. We aspire to be fair and thorough reporting that allows audiences to make their own judgments about topics and issues that matter to them. We pursue original journalism that exposes secrets and holds powerful people to account. And we deliver the high quality news and current affairs to people on their preferred platforms, whether their TV set is their way of absorbing information or whether it's through their AirPods. Our central aim is always to give Australians information they can trust. And this is important because in Australia and around the world, as you'd be aware, there's a crisis of trust in the media. The ABC is by far the most trusted media organisation in the country. And the statistics are that 79% of Australians aged 18 to 75 say they trust or highly trust information from the ABC, and that's a mile ahead of everyone else. But we never take it for granted. We need to vigorously protect that trust and work every single day to ensure that we're worthy of it. And everyone knows here that there are big challenges and complex dynamics confronting journalism across the board at the ABC and beyond the ABC. That includes audience fragmentation across proliferating channels and platforms, polarisation and echo chambers, with some hyper-partisan people increasingly only wanting reinforcement of their own opinions, the massive rise in social media as a source of news. 1 in 4 Australians now say social media is their main source of information. ABC News recently passed the milestone of 1 million followers on Instagram account. I'd like to say that Grace McKinnon, who's in the room, does a superb job doing vertical videos and explaining complex issues to a large part of our audience on those accounts. And on TikTok as well, where 9% of people use TikTok for news, and in the US, a third of people only get news on TikTok. That's how they get their news. So all this means the public has access to more information than ever before, but that ecosystem is being overrun by opinion, rumour, misinformation, disinformation, conspiracy theories, propaganda, clickbait and fakery. While misinformation and disinformation proliferate on social media sites, the companies behind them change their algorithms to deprioritise legitimate news services and threaten to kick them off at any time. And I've been speaking with my counterpart at the CBC, Brodie Fenelon, about this, where Facebook's kicked the CBC and all of their accounts off Facebook and Meta. That's Canada's public broadcaster. If the same happened here in coming months, the third of Australians who use Facebook for news, or the 16% who turn to Instagram for news, or the 10% who use Facebook Messenger, and even 9% who use WhatsApp for news now, could be deprived of ABC content and content from other legitimate news providers in Australia. The rise of generative AI technology will see the proliferation of deepfakes and bad faith actors, diminishing trust even further. And the trust issue has been exacerbated by political polarisation in Western societies. In 2023, the Edelman Trust Barometer found almost half of Australians believe the nation is more divided today than in the past. And major dividing forces were identified as being the rich and powerful at 72%, hostile foreign governments at 69%, and journalists at 51%. So just think about that last statistic for a moment, 51%. So half of those surveyed think that journalists across the board are responsible for high level of division. Simultaneously, we're seeing an increasingly toxic media environment where media businesses attack each other, eroding public perception of all news and journalism, and the ABC is a frequent target. Of course, the ABC should be scrutinised and held to account more than any other media outlet, just as we scrutinise other media outlets and other organisations and institutions and hold them to account. Media companies are no more immune to this than anyone else. But we carry a heavy responsibility to have all the checks and balances in place. And at the ABC, we have to be accountable, prepared to listen to good faith criticism, and open to improvement. The ABC is by far away the most transparent media organisation in the country, with an extensive complaint system, an ombudsman who independently investigates editorial complaints and publicly reports the findings. And it's clear that mistakes are certainly made. Missteps definitely happen, and we've got to admit when we can do better. I'll highlight a couple of examples just to be transparent and to speak in the transparent way I'm calling on us to. During our coverage of the tragic stabbings of Bondi Junction, we briefly broadcast unblurred images of one of the victims, which should have been blurred, and it was a human error. We were frankly devastated that it got to air. Shouldn't have happened. Just last week, it was brought to our attention by Channel 7 that a video clip in an online story from 2 years ago had an error. A preliminary inspection suggests a section of the audio was incorrectly edited, and we've removed the video, and we are looking into how this happened. And once we have the full facts, we'll determine the appropriate response. And until we have clarity on how that occurred, I won't be able to say much more today. I don't want to preempt that, but we are looking into it. And it should never be used as an excuse, but it should be remembered that ABC News is a team of more than 2,000 human beings around the country and across different places around the planet, which produces a massive amount of live and scheduled TV and radio, continuous news coverage, vertical video, online content every day, often at speed and under pressure. And I can't think of a news organisation in this country whose staff engages more consistently in the pursuit of excellence and in the pursuit of accurate, responsible journalism. We dug out the stats in terms of the number of complaints that have been investigated by the ABC Ombudsman since between January and June this year. There were almost 2,000 complaints that went to the Ombudsman, and 240 were investigated, and 27 of those were upheld. You can see the mistakes that we make because they're publicly published on the corrections and clarifications page, and editorial breaches in findings and regular reports are published by the ABC Ombudsman. We expect scrutiny at the ABC to be rigorous and thorough, and I don't shy away from that when it's warranted. But sometimes what's called scrutiny is really an agenda-driven attack, motivated by ideological, personal or commercial interests, often directed at specific journalists with the goal of denting their reputations. This trend across social media and from some media outlets, and let's be honest and call it what it often is, bullying, is about more than just the ABC. Spurious attacks on some journalists can potentially erode the reputation of all journalists. And that feeds this crisis of distrust in the media. That's why the scale of unfair attacks on ABC journalists, whether by social media trolls, commentators, or our media competitors, should be called out. Disturbingly, and research shows that this is evidence-based, we disproportionately see that women, First Nations, culturally diverse journalists are more targeted than anyone else. But it's not just confined to those groups. And if you hop on X now, I'm sure you'd see this, where activists on X, for example, rarely go on a day without piling on the respected presenter of Insiders and the ABC's national political lead, David Spears. David's track record and work over decades is exemplary. And make no mistake, he's a target of a regular vicious pile-on because a noisy cohort don't want an impartial journalist in a role like his. They want somebody who barracks for their side. David has the ABC's full support and respect for doing a great job. These kinds of attacks, whether on social or mainstream media, should bother those of us who value the incredible contribution made by Australian journalists and good journalism, wherever it happens. Underpinning the ABC's trust are our editorial standards. Our staff are rightly held to the highest standards because they work for the Australian taxpayer. Crucially, those standards are not there to stifle us. They don't stop us from being brave and doing agenda-setting, challenging, interesting journalism. But make no mistake, part of my job description as Director of News is enforcing and upholding those high standards. At times, that can be personally rewarding. When I'm reviewing high-profile stories that have made a huge impact, I'm often impressed by the professionalism of ABC journalists and their thorough marshalling of evidence and fact and their commitment to fairness. Sometimes it's harder. When my editorial decisions attract criticism, whether it's because I've put the brakes on a story to ask the journalist to go back and do more reporting, or whether it's defending something that's gone to air and ruffled feathers, or whether it's acknowledging that we've made a mistake. My job is not to be liked at all times by everybody. It's to work for the public and to uphold the reputation of ABC News so that we remain the best and most trusted media organisation in the country. The ABC belongs to all of you and to every member of the public, not to us. The standard of journalistic impartiality remains unchanged at the ABC, and it is this. Every person who signs up to work as a journalist for ABC News and receives the privilege of the public trust that comes from working under that respected and hard-won banner accepts a responsibility in return to strive at all times for accuracy, objectivity and fairness. Impartiality is not a choice at the ABC. It's enshrined in the ABC Act, which calls on us to adhere to the recognised standards of, quote, objective journalism. The concept of objective journalism takes account that everyone has different values, biases and perspectives. But objectivity means we set aside those views and rigorously test information with evidence-based, open-minded and fair journalism. It's not an easy discipline, but it's essential for everyone who works at the ABC. At times, the discussion about impartiality is misunderstood and oversimplified. Impartiality doesn't mean that journalists don't have feelings or opinions. Being human, of course they do. In fact, humanity is a grace note of the finest journalism. In fact, more journalists should put themselves in other people's shoes and think about issues from different perspectives. Because by doing so, we're more likely to consider all relevant perspectives and then achieve impartiality. It isn't only ABC audiences who have the right to expect impartiality. Any credible media organisation should ensure their journalism is accurate and fair, and they should have training and processes in place to support that. Just as importantly, we don't ask journalists to seek false balance, to fall into reductive both sides reporting. So in ABC content, we expect to see a diversity of perspectives where there's genuinely an unresolved debate. There should be a range of opinions and conflicting views with no significant strand of thought underrepresented. All information should be fact-based and verified. We should present the fullest range of facts we can muster, even if sometimes those facts may paint a picture of shades of grey rather than black and white. We don't go soft in political interviews because we happen to personally agree with the views of the guest. I can't imagine Patricia Karvelas, who's here, or Michael Rowland, who's also here, ever going easy on anyone, no matter their political persuasion. The best political interviewers have their reputations because they hold all comers equally accountable. The audience is unable to discern any agenda for an interview other than getting to the bottom of matters. We reject suggestions that we shouldn't platform people with particular political views. We don't platform people. We report on them, we interview them, challenge them, scrutinise them, again, so the public can make up their own minds. We don't aim to appease any side or audience segment. We reject any approach that selects or censors who we can report on the basis of approved ideology. Because who does the approving? It's a slippery slope. This is nothing new, of course. It's a proven approach. It's made quality journalism a central part of successful democracies around the world. It's how we recognise and celebrate great journalism and journalists. It's the absolute key to why the ABC is as trusted as it is. All of this says to me that this is the time for ABC News to recommit and lean in even further to the core values that we believe in, of accuracy, fairness, quality, impartiality, integrity and independence. And underpinning these values is teamwork and respect. These guiding principles are not an arbitrary philosophy exclusively for an elite group, and nor do I buy the argument that younger generations of journalists are incapable of adhering to it. It's a tested and consistent framework to ensure journalists serve the interests of the audience and not their agendas in all their work. These principles will keep us relevant and essential to the public in these complex and confusing times. We also need to make sure that we meet Australians on all the different platforms that they consume news. Over the past year, the ABC's digital reach has for the first time overtaken our broadcast reach. We aren't a linear broadcaster striving to be digital, we are a digital news provider. And this is happening worldwide. UK broadcast regulator Ofcom reported last week that online has for the first time overtaken TV in its annual survey of the UK news habits. 71% of the population said they used online news services versus 70% watching TV news bulletins. And for people aged between 16 and 24, the number saying they use social media for news was 82%. In the US this year, for the first time, advertisers are projected to spend more on digital video platforms than on television. At the ABC, digital innovation, and when we talk about digital innovation, it's not new for us. It's the norm. We've been doing it for decades. Our website started almost 30 years ago. Can you believe that? ABC iView was Australia's first broadcast-on-demand streaming service when it launched 16 years ago. The ABC Charter, as you'd know, was amended with bipartisan agreement in 2013 to specifically include the obligation to provide digital media services. So when we talk about digital, and when we talk about the need to serve people in the digital realm, we're really talking about delivering our quality news and information and journalism to the audiences in the ways they want, need, and expect to. Digital also doesn't mean young people. All ages are digital now. And I read a fascinating statistic the other day that 1/3 of baby boomers report engaging with news on social media. And so consumers of news on social media are not just contained to young people as it's often reported. And also just reflect on your own habits about how you access news and information. Do you stream a scheduled program live? Do you listen to podcasts? Do you catch up on a show later? Do you have a smart TV where you stream ABC News via the app? Do you scroll through news headlines on your phone? Do you watch a video on the bus? I could go on forever, but I won't, just to reassure you. Do you like having all of those options at your disposal and any of it? Because the key thing to understand is that's a given, but ABC News is not and will never abandon our loyal broadcast audiences who watch our free-to-air programs and listen to us on radio. In fact, the way we absorb that information now is a digital experience. But nor do we ignore the reality that more and more people of all ages want to be able to choose when and where they consume our content. Ensuring we deliver all audiences the ABC best journalism wherever and however they want it is one of my top tasks. So let me tell you some of what we've been doing on my watch to cement our position as the nation's most trusted news organisation and to ensure we're future-proofing ABC News for the future. Recently, you might have seen, we've redesigned the ABC News website to make it more consistent, attractive, functional across all platforms. In July this year, more than 12.7 million Australians came to the ABC via the website and app. That's a huge number of the Australian population. It's 60% of the Australian population over the age of 14 coming to the website in that month. It's huge. You'll note our website and TV news now have the same look and feel. We also brought back the old ABC News theme. The combined look and feel across the TV or video experience and the website is to really speak to the fact that all of our news, be it video, audio, or written, is part of the same whole, and all of it is a form of digital. On the editorial front, we're keeping up scrutiny of state governments by bringing Stateline back, this time in a digital-first format, and in coming months you're going to see more in this space. I'm delighted to be able to announce today that we're forming an investigative reporting team within our state-based reporting teams and state newsrooms. This will comprise journalists from metro and regional teams overseen by a leader. The team would work with investigative teams in other areas, including the investigative reporting team, the regional investigative team, and specialist reporters in their locations to collaborate on investigations. We've all seen over the last 5 years what a powerful role state governments play in our lives, and it's integral we're holding every single state and territory government better to account around the nation. And this is a really exciting step to do more of that. Their remit will be to break, value add and elevate stories about state governments. That is their specific remit. And to really focus on probity and accountability at a state and local level. This will build on the ABC's tremendous legacy of investigative journalism embodied by the fearless Forensic Four Corners. It's been on air for 63 years and it's still going strong. It's also grown its audience across broadcast and ABC iView in the past 2 years. We're also helping to fill a civics education gap and media literacy by expanding the beloved Behind the News program. I'm sure you'd all remember the trolley being wheeled in with the TV at primary school. We took the step last year to expand Behind the News to high schools by doing 5-minute explainer videos about topics of interest for young people. We've created new digital roles across multiple teams, particularly in current affairs teams and also at Canberra Parliament House. A number of those were really tough decisions about ending some roles, but it was about rejigging others to be able to do what we're talking about. We've set up new standalone teams within our budget, including the new Indigenous Affairs reporting team, or newish rather, they've been around a year or so now. The climate change reporting team, given it's such an important issue for the public, and the new ABC News Verify team, which is obviously critically important in the context of calling out misinformation and disinformation and making sense of that for the public. Structurally, we've combined our regional division and metro news teams to give regional issues a stronger voice and elevate those stories to national audiences. And regional radio also sits in news now, with an estimated 1.4 million Australians listening to local radio each week. We're also the home of ABC Rural, and again, we're ensuring those stories reach all Australians on the web and app and in collaborations with the wonderful Landline, while preserving the nearly 80-year tradition of the Country Hour across Australia every lunchtime. One of the most fulfilling parts of my job has been travelling around the country and getting to spend time on the ground with our fantastic regional bureau. It's an unparalleled presence, and what always strikes me about when I'm on the ground with those teams, I was in Broken Hill recently, spent time with the awesome team in Ballarat earlier this year. They have such a clear focus on serving their local communities with information they need and connecting the dots across the country on issues that matter to their community, whether it's healthcare or education or any other number of issues. The emergency broadcasting team now also lives in ABC News, and it's Australia's #1 source of factual and reliable information in emergencies. We track how many emergency events that are formally initiated as part of that team, and since July 1 this year, we've activated for 60 emergency events already. And they're events that are defined as events that threaten people's lives on our property. They do an amazing job. We're resourcing our major bureau across the planet in terms of our international teams as regional hubs. We're investing more in those teams to enhance our coverage across the Asia, the Americas, Europe and the Middle East. And under the Pacific Local Journalism Network, we've placed additional correspondents in 6 Pacific countries. And you'll see a lot of those correspondents do fantastic work across programs like News Breakfast and throughout our news programming, bringing a voice to issues in the Pacific that would otherwise not be heard. When people turn to the ABC, we want them to find news that is meaningful to them, whether it's international or national or local or regional. And ABC audiences demand to be informed, but they also want to be entertained, moved and intellectually stretched. We offer stories that provide novelty, delight, intrigue, food for thought, that give people information relevant to all parts of their lives. People's interests aren't binary or predictable. They can range from hard-edge politics and business news right through to health or entertainment stories. Every newsroom in the world and across Australia has and will continue to debate what issues should lead the news day to day. It's incumbent on the ABC to provide a broad range of content to connect with as many Australians as possible. But we must always make clear as part of that our top news priority, amidst all the different things people care about, are stories that are significant. We believe there's a place for all sorts of news, hard and soft, breaking and features, worthy and ephemeral. But news of local, national and international significance is what the ABC chooses to lead with, regardless of platform. I mentioned my son Harry earlier, and I said I'd return to him because our experience as a family has taught me many things. One of them's been strongly reaffirmed through that experience, and it's reaffirmed my view about the importance of diversity in newsrooms. Even though my dad, and through my dad, I'd been somewhat exposed to the experiences of people dealing with childhood cancer, when my own family personally started down that road, I realised I knew nothing about the lived experience of being a person with cancer or being a carer of a person with cancer. Hospital rooms, specialists, horrible tests and painful treatments you wouldn't have even known about. Permanent sick bags in the car, and the constant nagging fear of never knowing what news would come next. As we went through this awful experience, I fortunately had all these journalistic skills I could draw on to find out information, and also I know a lot of social privilege. But I did meet a lot of children and friends, well, parents of children rather, in adjoining beds in the rooms we'd share, where they didn't have that, who didn't have a workplace from which they could take paid carers leave, who didn't speak English as a first language or have a skill set that involved trawling through medical papers, looking for data and options. I had a more vivid sense of how hard it is to hold down a job when you have a sick family member. I noticed how crippling parking and tolls and petrol costs when you drive to hospital multiple times a week. I noticed what schools can and can't do to support your child when they're missing weeks upon weeks of school. I got a better sense of how for some people the NDIS is completely life-changing, but how hard it can be for people to navigate onto it. I was reminded of how our health system is primarily focused on the immediacy of treating physical illness while broadly neglecting the broad and hidden impact of mental health on individuals and their loved ones. Things I'd never given a great deal of thought to suddenly struck me as stories, such as the gap between what Medicare covers and what medical care actually costs when you're sick. Of course I knew about the gap, but I saw and felt the true scale of it with fresh eyes, and I saw firsthand the full impact of it and the harder choices it created for people less fortunate than me. My personal experience strengthened a view I've held for a long time about why diversity in newsrooms is important. It's not so we can tokenistically say we look diverse, or say we can, in cynical terms and unfortunate terms, people use the term to tick diversity boxes. It's because having staff from a broad range of life and personal experience allows us to see stories and become connected with communities which are otherwise invisible to us. That's why in ABC newsrooms we want people from every background in our teams. Whether that's people with disabilities, people from different cultural backgrounds, First Nations journalists, people who live in regional Australia, people of differing religions, people of all socio-economic backgrounds. We need the widest range of people that we can get to staff our teams, to make sure that we can see as many of our blind spots as possible. And that's what diversity means to me, and it's why I think it's essential in journalism. As journalists, we're relentlessly curious and seek out evidence and people with experiences well beyond our own. But by also working with colleagues who are genuinely from all walks of life, we're so much better placed to deliver information the community needs by knowing our communities intimately. Our lived experience informs our journalism and our standards around objectivity, impartiality, accuracy and independence guide how we approach and produce it. My life experience and the lived experience I've reflected on today, with first-hand involvement in the hospital system, doesn't give me the right to use my privileged position as an ABC journalist, become an advocate or activist on issues in the news, such as the sustainability of private health insurance or what drugs land on the PBS. All it gives me is an enhanced awareness that those things are important issues for many people, and there are a range of views, and I'm more informed in how I report or cover it. It gives me ideas for stories and better ideas for stories, not motivation to share my own opinions about those issues. It opens my eyes and ears. Do we at the ABC always get it right? Well, as I've tried to be upfront about, of course not. We're human. Good journalists will occasionally make mistakes and misjudgments, especially because so often they're working at speed or live or they're on the fly. While the ABC is not permanently in crisis, which is a lazy narrative you may sometimes read, I'm not saying it doesn't have its moments. It's a big, varied, vigorous organisation full of talented and driven individuals doing a lot of things once, and often very quickly. I'm damn proud of what we do at ABC News, and I will defend it every single day. It's not my job to win friends, to appease critics, to keep politicians or business leaders happy, or even to keep every single ABC staff member happy. It's my job to protect my organisation's great legacy and indeed to build on it, to ensure we are match fit for our present and future challenges. I'm proud to be an ABC journalist. I'm proud to serve the public and the audience that we serve, and I will stand for integrity and impartiality in our journalism while I have the privilege of doing this job. Thank you to our loyal audiences, and welcome to those who are just discovering us. We hope we will be of value to you. Thank you to all Australians for your faith in us. You have my assurance that under my leadership, we will continue to do our best to deliver news that deserves your trust. Thank you.